You are Locked On Bulls Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Chicago on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into the Locked On Bulls Postcast here on the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel. Joe George here with you as always, and the Bulls lose 122-100 to move to 20-28 on the season as we are just a handful of days away from the NBA trade deadline. Let's see, what do we got going on today's show? Well, they got their butts kicked. Let's start there. Not a good game for the Bulls. Competitive first quarter, okay. And then it was a disaster. Typical things that we see in this game from the Bulls this season. Guys having career nights and really just dominating in a way that is just it's just bad, obviously, for the Chicago Bulls. We're going to talk about Pat Williams, though, and Buzelis being the first two guys off the bench. That continuing, Pat Williams does look much more comfortable coming off the bench, so we'll talk about that in a positive way to take away from this game. And just interesting that Buzelis is, again, the first guy off the bench in back-to-back games. And we'll talk a little trade deadline, because this game was not good for the Bulls. There's not a ton to take away from it, honestly, losing by 22 points and just getting smoked by Kristpas Porzingis. So who are the untouchable players on the Chicago Bulls? We'll get into that as well. Today's episode is sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So this game starts off fine. It's 26-23 at the end of the first quarter. The Bulls are competitive. They're looking fine. Lonzo Ball's got 9 points early on. He's going right away. Boston went out to a 10-0 lead to start this game. The Bulls closed the gap. A lot of that was due to Lonzo Ball. So he starts off the game really strong. It looks like after the first quarter, this will be probably a Bulls loss, but maybe it'll be a competitive game. And then they got absolutely just bully balled the rest of the game. They outscored 41-28 in the second quarter. Obviously, that's the big difference maker at the end of this game. They kept it, I guess, relatively close, only outscored by 4 and 2 points in the third and fourth quarter. But the second quarter, just dominating performance by the Boston Celtics. I mean, they were out there early, just running away with this thing. They were up 20-8 to start the quarter. The Bulls did have a sizable amount of, I would say, comeback in the quarter, but in that 20-8 run to start the quarter, it's also you had a 15-2 run, in about 3.5 minutes, to where, again, the Bulls really troubling that even, yes, without Zach LaVine, and this might be what life without Zach LaVine is like, assuming that he's traded and he doesn't get his wish to stay in Chicago. But this is what it's going to be like, most likely, is these nights if Zach LaVine is traded. Now, because even with him, we've seen the Bulls multiple times this year go 3 to 4 minutes without scoring a bucket or maybe scoring one basket, and that's what happened there in the second quarter, where Boston's just running away with this thing, and they're just dominating you in the second quarter. And like we've seen all season long, it's incredible how many times we have to say this, that a player has a season-high, career-high night against the Chicago Bulls. Kristpas Porzingis, season-high in points. He ends up with 34 points on the night. He scored 13 of the first 15 points for the Boston Celtics. So it was 15-8 when he got that 13th point. So he's at all their points but 2. So he's outscoring the Bulls. He's outscoring Lonzo Ball, who starts to score, like I said, early on in the first. And he hits a career high in three-pointers with 8 on the night. This is the guy, this was like a moment where you're like, hey, this is the guy that we were promised when he came out of the draft. This is what people thought, the unicorn of Kristpas Porzingis was going to be when he was drafted by the New York Knicks. We're finally seeing that in spurts here with Boston, but the Bulls just had no answer for him. Kind of like when you play and you're not really going to, Nikola Vucevic isn't going to be an answer for Porzingis. You don't have an answer for Jason Tatum. You don't have an answer for Jaylen Brown, who ended up with 28 points on the night. So they just kicked your ass. There's no other way to put it. The Boston Celtics are the defending NBA champions. Yes, they just lost to the Houston Rockets. That's the second best team in the Western Conference right now. The Chicago Bulls are a game up of the Philadelphia 76ers as the 10 seed, and right around the trade deadline, they really might be out of playoff position, which hopefully gives the signal to the front office to lesser some of their asking prices for guys like Vooch and maybe even LaVine and Lonzo Ball. We'll get into all those guys more in the third segment of the show. But if you're not in the playing game, then what are you doing? Even being in the playing game, like there's no point to keeping these guys around when you're going to have performances like this. And again, it is the Boston Celtics, but it just shows you that like without Zach LaVine, even if he was there, like I think we all think like maybe you lose 122 to 108, and it's a little bit different of a gap in scoring here, but not that much. We've seen losses like this happen all season. This is where like it would stun me if we got to the trade deadline, 8 days away, 7 days away, whatever it is now, and the Bulls front office was like, yeah, we're going to keep it together. We're going to, keep these extremely high asking prices instead of just like hitting the ignite button and blowing this thing up and getting ready to actually start this thing over. Because as we'll also talk about, we saw, if you follow, Sylvie from ESPN 1000 on Twitter, he put out this poll question, and man, I hope the front office saw it, and it was just like on my mind as this entire game was happening, of just how bad things have gotten for your support. Now I think United Center fans have been great this year. I've not been at a game this year, and I can't wait to get back. But like I'm not gonna fly back to Illinois to see the Bulls play and for this team. They're just not worth it. But Sylvie put out this poll. 4 options. How much Bulls basketball are you watching? A lot, a little, I won't watch, I can't get the channel. 3% said a lot, so shout out to you. You're probably listening to the show right now. If you're part of that 3%, this is about 10,000 people voted in this, so it's a good sample size. 13% said a little, 42% said I won't watch, 42% said I can't get the channel. That's where Bulls fan support is at, and you have performances like this. You're sticking with your team potentially at the deadline if your asking prices are too high, and this is going to be the result that you get in a lot of these games where fans are just kind of like, like you're not going to trade everybody, but like this is where we saw, thinking of the trade deadline, where Lonzo Ball has attraction, like why teams want to trade for Lonzo Ball, why he's not just a salary dump, why there's a conversation to be had about keeping Lonzo Ball, because he really has turned into the old Lonzo offensively and defensively. There's times where he rips threes and they're terrible, but then he rips them and they're absolutely beautiful. But just a tough game for the Bulls. And Kristpas Porzingis just absolutely dominated most of this game, as did Jaylen Brown. And the Bulls are just totally outmanned, outmatched, and just didn't have a shot against the Boston Celtics. Coming into this game, I think we all kind of expected it, but as you watch it unfold, it's just one of those where like it's kind of like a car wreck, where you don't want to look away, or you want to look away, but you can't really. That's what it felt like watching tonight's game for the Bulls. So coming up next, Patrick Williams, coming off the bench for the second straight game. Modest Buzelis, second straight game, being the first guy off of the bench. Some things of note from those two guys, and even thinking about the immediate future of this team with or without the trade deadline. We'll figure out as we talk about it their roles. But I like that what we're seeing from Patrick Williams. He's the lone bright spot, I think, kind of in this game. Like that, he looks so much more comfortable coming off the bench, trying to be the guy, even though he's not like a guy that's going to take you anywhere deep in the playoffs. But for what his role is with the Bulls now, this looks good on him. And Modest Buzelis, a couple interesting notes for him in tonight's game as we get ready to watch him in the slam dunk contest here in just a couple weeks. All right, coming up next, we'll get into all that stuff here on the Locked On Bulls postcast on the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel. Attending NFL playoffs games is an unforgettable experience, and it brings fans together. I went to my first playoff game this year because, well, the Bears don't make the playoffs that much. So I live in Houston, Texas now. So I happened to say, I'm going to go to a playoff game. I'm going to go to the Houston Texans playoff game. I'm going to check it out. I'm going to see what it's like. I'm going to hopefully see my first ever playoff win in the NFL, and I saw it thanks to the Houston Texans. And I used Gametime to get there. The excitement, the energy was absolutely unforgettable. And Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Like I said, I used Gametime to get those tickets, to find out where the best seats were in the house, and using the Gametime Picks feature, it's easy, it's simple, and it helps you find great value on seats around the venue. The Super Deal was especially impressive, offering the best value for the event. The app's features like seat views before you buy and all-in pricing with no surprise fees at checkout made the experience smooth and reliable. Plus, the on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantees gave me peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, so Patrick Williams is the second guy off the bench in this game. For the second game in a row, we see, even without Zach LaVine, we saw the return of Coby White. So Billy Donovan sticks with the same starting five, just subbing out Zach LaVine for Coby White in his return from injury. So Patrick Williams comes off the bench again. I like this. I like this decision process from Billy Donovan. Talked about it after the last game as well. To hold guys to the same standard, as we didn't see Julian Phillips check in until the fourth quarter of the game in pretty much garbage time. Not sure exactly what he did to be on Billy Donovan's sour side for this game, but it kind of feels like he's often in that doghouse a little bit. Not totally sure exactly what it is about Phillips that Billy Donovan seems to look at specifically, but we see Patrick Williams come off the bench again in this game. And look, in a game where you get absolutely killed, there's got to be something that stands out in a somewhat positive light. And that's what I would say with Patrick Williams. He looks more aggressive. He looks more comfortable. He's making better decisions. I look back to, I think it ended up being a foul, and Jalen Smith had to go to the free throw line. But Patrick Williams is coming down in transition, catches the pass. He stops right at the three-point line and does this great little bounce pass as he pulls up to Jalen Smith, cutting into the hoop. It was a great play. And it just looks like we're seeing better overall effort from Patrick Williams. Better offense, better defense, better rebounding, more just, willingness to take good shots, not just sitting at the three-point line. He's attacking the rim better in this role. So I don't know what the long-term future of Patrick Williams will be in this role, because obviously if Zach LaVine and Vooch are both traded on February 6th, then Patrick Williams obviously is going to be back in your starting line. But let's live in a nightmare scenario here for a second and say the Bulls ask for too much for all these guys, and for whatever reason, they stick it out, and this is their roster for the remainder of the season. I hope that this continues. And even if those guys are traded, I'm open to the idea of Patrick Williams coming off this role, because it might just be what's best for him in the future. The reality is that if both those guys are traded, Patrick Williams is going to have to be a scorer so you can try to be competitive in basketball games, because while we all want them to outwardly tank at this point in the season, the players aren't really going to do that. So I do like this role for Patrick Williams that Billy Donovan has now put him in. And as long as this team is constructed this way, whether it's between now and the deadline, post-deadline, whatever it is, or potentially even next season when the roster looks totally different and we assume he's still going to be on it, I kind of like this. And I kind of want to see some run of what it looks like. But I think it's also of note from this game that we see Modest Buzelis be the first guy off of the bench. Now, this is something I've been asking for a while, of just like, no matter how tough it looks at times, just play the kid. Just play him. Just play him. Let him learn on the court. He doesn't make the mental lapses that would cause him to often get benched. He had a couple nice plays, obviously, in this game. He had the one corner three that was a really good offensive possession for the Bulls, one of the few it felt like they had on the night. But he's still got A+ effort offensively on defense. He attacked Porzingis, trying to get after him there in the fourth quarter, trying to put him on a poster. So I like that Buzelis is the sixth guy coming off the bench without Zach LaVine now, and obviously in the last game, it was without Coby White. And I don't know if, now where Patrick Williams will easily, obviously, move back into the starting lineup if a bunch of guys are traded, it might not be the case for Buzelis. They might continue to play him a little bit with kid gloves and hey, you're going to come off the bench. We're not going to play you 40 minutes a game. We're going to still limit what you're doing out there. But I am encouraged by at least that development as well. I also think it's of note for this game, as you're watching it, that Buzelis had 4 fouls and was still on the court. That's important for me, because it's important that young players learn to play with fouls. You can't take guys out every time they're, at 3 or 4 fouls if they get a couple quick ones. Sometimes you have to play through it. And we've seen Billy Donovan do that with Coby White. We see all NBA coaches do that with certain guys. But I was glad to see Billy Donovan not hit the panic button himself and just let Buzelis sit out there for a little bit with a couple fouls and work through it, kid. Figure out how to adjust your game now that you can't afford to pick up another foul in, what is it, like the third quarter when he ended up with his fourth, I think. Maybe it was early in the fourth. But just keep running that out. Like just keep doing little things like that, because at least that makes sense in terms of development for him. Of like what you're looking for is you're showing confidence in him by being the first guy off the bench. You're showing confidence in him that you're leaving him out there with a handful of fouls, which he can't really afford to get another one. Those are all things that I want to see for Buzelis the rest of the season. It's not just about putting guys on posters. It's just about being put in a better position than he was early in the season. And then now as your season is totally unraveling and you're going to be out of the play-in tournament and you're going to be a lottery team before we know it, continue to just let the growth of Modest Buzelis be the focal point of this roster. It's what matters most. Like, he might not ever be a superstar, but could he be a really good role player? Could he be a star? Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Like, kids develop like at a different rate these days. Like, we see, Amen Thompson come on in his second year. We see finally Cade Cunningham from 2018 or whenever he got drafted. I guess it wasn't that, 2021 when he got drafted, has come on in a huge way for the Pistons this year. So you got to take your bumps and bruises along the way. So I like where they're going with these two guys. That at least on a night like this against the Celtics, when you have no shot, you stick to your guns with Patrick Williams. You bring him off the bench. You continue to see what that looks like. You continue to see what it's like to have both Patrick Williams and Buzelis on the court together. That also will matter, because when you think about what is most likely, I still think for post-deadline is a starting lineup of, because I would put Buzelis in the starting lineup at least, is Kobe White, Ayo Dosunmu, Modest Buzelis, Patrick Williams, Jalen Smith. That to me is the most realistic starting five the Bulls will predominantly play starting February 8th or whenever their first game is after the deadline. Because I think we will see major changes finally from this front office. If we don't, just fire everyone immediately because they don't know what they're doing. If the Reinsdorfs just watch this team just stay status quo, I cannot imagine them feeling like that's a good idea at this point. Let's talk about it. Let's talk more about that, because this game, watching it, it's you can see okay, who is a good fit on a good team. I think a little bit the last couple games. So I think we start to get a good picture of what it's like, what life without Zach LaVine will look like, and who is untradeable, who is untouchable, who is the guy you want most, traded the most. We'll get into a little bit of that next, because the Bulls got killed by the Celtics. So we got to talk about that. We got to talk about the deadline. It's the most important thing for Bulls fans right now. So we'll get into that next here on the Locked On Bulls Postcast on the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel. All right, so in a game like this, where it's largely uncompetitive, you see Nikola Vucevic only have 6 points. Lonzo Ball had 9, got all of them very early in the first quarter. We saw Kobe White return. 3-point shot didn't look great in this game. Ayo was fine, and Josh Giddey was largely a nothing burger, I would say, in this game. 10 points, 6 assists, 4 rebounds. Really, your best nights came from Patrick Williams, 16 points off the bench, and Modest Buzelis, who had 12 points off the bench. Two guys we just talked about, but those are really the two light, very low-level bright spots in this game. So we had this report come out from Joe Cowley from the Chicago Sun-Times that Modest Buzelis was the only player on this team that was totally untouchable. And watching this Celtics game, another thing that was just sitting in my mind as I'm watching this game. I'm okay, does that make sense? Watching Ayo out there, watching Dalen Terry out there, not seeing much of Julian Phillips. Who are the guys when you watch a game like tonight versus Celtics that I would want to describe as untouchable? Now, frankly, the only one that really is, honestly, probably is Modest Buzelis. So I guess I'll frame this more as guys I kind of want, as guys I would like the Bulls to keep. And that's pretty much him and Ayo. Ayo is really the only other one that I would be disappointed if our first postcast show after the trade deadline, Ayo was on a different team. That would bum me out. It's a guy who plays good defense. He attacks the rim. He takes good three-point shots, even if they don't go in all the time. We've seen, it's been a little bit of a struggle for him this year. I would rather watch Ayo out there than a lot of the guys the Bulls could acquire or the Bulls would have to then play instead. And when you think about the future of the Bulls, that's the kind of guy you want coming off the bench. bring in energy when you're trying to be competitive. You got him on a good contract. Like it's you could move it for that reason. Like maybe you can get a good asset in return. But if you've sat on like LaVine for as long as you have, and part of that's because people didn't want to trade for him. But if you sat on some of these guys for so long, I would just keep Ayo in-house. And I know he hasn't been really connected to rumors, but when you hear that everyone's available besides Modest Buzelis, the design of that report to come out is to help catch the ears and eyes of general managers across the league. So they can try to figure out what would Kobe White, Ayo, Patrick Williams, Josh Giddey, Nikola Vucevic, Zach LaVine, what would any of these guys look like on our roster? Like, what's their fit? And for the Bulls, it also, in theory, if they actually go through with it, is also the right way to approach it. Of straight up fire sale, move everybody that you can for the best assets that are actually available to you. Don't get left in don't be the last person at the dance waiting for a partner at the trade deadline. Make your moves aggressively and quickly and take on as many, expiring contracts as you can to free up cap space and to build this team for the future, because they are just sitting where they've been the last couple years, with or without Zach LaVine. They're just sitting there. They're not a playoff team. They're not a lottery team. They're a fake playoff team, which is what the play-in tournament is, where you have 20 of the 30 teams making the playoffs. It's not the real playoffs, because besides like the first year, have we seen anyone really have great success going from the play-in tournament? Like, imagine the Chicago Bulls somehow coming out of the play-in tournament and having to play the Cavs or the Celtics in the first round. It'd be 4 games of this. So, like, if that's what you're trying to achieve as the front office, like, I don't know what to tell you if that's what your goals are. So, Modest Buzelis is the only one, as, like, I think it's obvious, as a full-on untouchable player. But then again, watching tonight's game, I'm like, I don't want to see them move off of Ayo. I kind of put Kobe White in a similar category where that would probably get you a first-round pick. So at that point, I think I'd have to say yes. But really, the question is the big guys, the star, in quotes, players that the Bulls have. Nikola Vucevic, there's Golden State rumors, there's Dallas Mavericks rumors. Zach LaVine's being connected to a bunch of teams, but also reportedly doesn't want to leave Chicago, which send him to Milwaukee then, so he can, keep his house. They can stay local. He just doesn't play for the Bulls anymore, but just find a way to send him to Milwaukee. Also, like, not to be totally heartless, because I know he's literally not with the Bulls right now because they just are having or had a second kid. Like, feelings shouldn't matter. You should just do what's best for the franchise. And I think even like if Zach LaVine wants this, like really does want to stay, I think he would understand it of why he's being traded. But if you want to, treat your guys right and do what's best for them, then find a way to get Zach LaVine to Milwaukee. Like find a way to send him an hour and a half away from the suburbs, at least where I grew up. I think it was like an hour and a half to get to Milwaukee. Maybe it was an hour, honestly, even. It wasn't that far. But, like, just find a way to get him there. Vucevic, find a way to move him. Reportedly, asking price, too high. Okay. Watching a game like tonight versus the Celtics, he's scoring 9 points. Like, what are you asking for? Like, what are you asking for Nikola Vucevic that is being deemed too high? Like, how is the front office, can you watch this game versus the Celtics and just be like, yeah, we're going to stand firm on what we're asking for Vooch, who I really like. Like, I'm not trying to disparage Vooch. I'm trying to trash the front office for not just being willing to move on. And now reports are reports, and we never know the full-on validity of it. It could be, trying to put external pressure on the Bulls front office, but you can't leave the trade deadline, in my opinion, with Vooch on this roster. For a while, if you've been listening to these shows, I've been very adamant about keeping Lonzo Ball. I still think I want to. I still think watching tonight's game, him scoring the way he did at the start of the game, the defense he plays, it just feels like he's back. And that's part of the reason why you probably should trade him. Even though I don't want you to, even though I want him to be a tone setter for guys like Buzelis and Ayo and this young core that you kind of have on the roster, but you kind of don't as well. But as you would blow it up, he's like the kind of example setter that I would want on this team. But if there are 4 to 5 teams, like there reportedly are, that are interested in Lonzo Ball, as much as I enjoy watching him play for the Bulls every single night, if someone's willing to give you some kind of asset in return that is draft capital, I would say, because he is technically an expiring contract. So, like, if you're going to not extend him, like there's no reason to move off of him for just another expiring unless you're trying to do right by him. Now, I'm going to be a hypocrite here. Fully acknowledge that. I said feelings don't matter. If you're going to take care of anybody, you take care of Lonzo Ball. After everything that guy's been through, 3 years, not playing games, trying to come back, trying to be a Bull, and he finally is out there. He's playing good basketball for you. If he wants out and you can get him back to the Lakers or wherever he wants to go, hell, even if he wants to go to Charlotte just to play with his brother, I think I'd just do it. I just move on. And that one, I would take care of him because of what he's been through as a player. But not a fun night for the Bulls. Not a lot of those this season where they just get absolutely trounced by Kristpas Porzingis, Jaylen Brown, and the Boston Celtics as they lose 122 to 100 to move to 20-28 on the season. Double checking the standings here to give a quick update on that. Yes, the Bulls are now officially 18.5 games out of first place, which means they are 10th place in the Eastern Conference, as are the Philadelphia 76ers. The Bulls are technically a play-in team because of a win percentage of .417, and the 76ers is a .413. So they are hanging on by a thread as the deadline approaches, and you got a bunch of teams that are right behind you. So even logically, if you kept this team together, which is what I would tell the front office, like you watch the Celtics game, you watch a lot of the games the Bulls have played this year, if you ask the front office, do you honestly think if you don't trade as many guys as you can and you just keep them all, that you're going to make at least the play-in tournament this year? The answer has to be no. Like there's nothing logically that would say like this team is going to for sure be a play-in team this year. So those are your goals. Either be in the lottery or make the play-in. You are much, much closer to the lottery, and really making the play-in tournament shouldn't matter. I just get this feeling that the Bulls like to say they did. Like it just feels like one of those where like the Reinsdorfs, if they were talking to a friend who doesn't know much about basketball and the way it's constructed, the playoffs are, that Jerry and his kid could just say, oh, we're a playoff team. We didn't win the championship, but we're a playoff team again. That's what it feels like they would be trying to accomplish if they kept everyone. So we'll keep an eye on it, and we are here for all these post-game shows. Still waiting, I think, official word on if, when Zach LaVine would potentially return for the deadline. I personally don't expect to see him as a member of the Bulls ever again. Maybe we'll get one more game, but there is obviously a risk involved that if you play him after a bunch of days off that he could get hurt. So I do think that this is the official start of a new era because I do think Zach LaVine will finally be moved. And I think tonight was a really harsh reality if you weren't, already aware of what it was going to be like, of what life without Zach LaVine is going to look like for the Bulls the rest of this season. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening on audio. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. We're here. We're live after every single Bulls game. As soon as the game ends, we hit live here on the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel. We also will do Bears games when they're back, Notre Dame games next season, and we'll be starting Cubs baseball right around the corner. So if you're a Cubs fan, we're going to be here for as many of the 162 regular season games and hopefully playoff games for the Cubs. Hopefully we get to do a playoff game or, like 18 would be nice because I think that's how many it takes now to win the World Series off the top of my head. So we're here. Hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, also, the audio is available on the Locked On Bulls audio feed, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find our show that will be there on the feed. Also, the daily Locked On Bulls shows, which you can find on YouTube. They also, all their shows end up there as well. So all on one feed, all Bulls content. So thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with us. Go Bulls. Unfortunately, a tough night for the team as they lose to the Boston Celtics. We'll talk to you next time. Peace.